Welcome back to In the Loop, folks. You might not know this, but there are a few places around the world that were declared uninhabitable due to environmental damage and health concerns because of mines. One of them is Picher, Oklahoma. Back when it was first founded in 1913, people were drawn to it because of all the lead and zinc found in the area. By the 1920s, its population had grown to nearly 14,000 people, but today it's a ghost town. The decades of unrestricted mining left piles of toxic metal, cave-in risks, contaminated groundwater, and more. In 1980, the area became a part of the Tar Creek Superfund site by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. It includes places that were all a part of the Tri-State Mining District, northeast Oklahoma, southeastern Kansas, and southwestern Missouri. Decades later, the cleanup continues. National correspondent Allison Herrera, in partnership with environmental outlet Grist, traveled to Picher to highlight the lasting impacts and see what progress has been made.
The northeastern part of Oklahoma is home to 8 federally recognized tribal nations, including the Quapaw. It's also where one of the largest mining booms in the country took place. This is where Picher sits, once a tight-knit community, including miners, who were known as guerrillas. Originally, this was Quapaw land. They were forcibly removed from Arkansas to here in the early 1800s. Nearly 6 decades later, large deposits of zinc and lead were discovered. Today, Picher has the distinction of being the site of one of the biggest cleanups of hazardous materials in the United States. This is where Henry Ellick's house used to sit. Henry and his wife Jean Ann raised their family here, and they didn't want to leave, even though it was polluted. Ellick's ties to the land here run as deep as any Quapaw's, like Secretary-Treasurer Guy Barker, who showed me what used to be his family's land in Picher. It's called Blue Goose.
It's not unlike kind of any other piece of family property. Grandmother passes away, has it left to, 10, 15, 20 different grandchildren.
This used to be owned by Barker's great-great-grandmother. It's now in the middle of what's known as the Tar Creek Superfund site. Barker's family has a history here.
Really, kind of the fabric of my being is kind of stitched into this area.
His great-grandfather, Victor Griffin, was the chief of the tribe at the height of the mining boom.
My great-grandfather, who was Guy Barker the First, worked in the mines most of his life. Died early, silicosis, which would be kind of, in this area, would have been their version of like black lung.
High levels of lead were found in the drinking water. And in 1994, the Indian Health Service told the EPA that 34% of Quapaw children in the area had lead concentration levels in their bloodstream above the federal limit. Mines in Picher powered the tanks and machine guns for soldiers in both world wars. The mining boom ended in the 1970s. Families living here were forced to take a buyout because the town was deemed too dangerous to live in. Henry Ellick and his wife Jean Ann were bought out too after it was determined that their house was in danger of collapsing because of all the mining.
Yeah, at that time, see, we didn't know if it was going to be ongoing, but if you didn't take the buyout, could you live there? Well,
yeah.
you could think like that, but also since they condemned the town, your house wasn't worth nothing.
You'd never be able to sell anything out of your house.
You had to basically take what they offered.
Now Barker and Quapaw Nation's environmental director, Craig Creeman, are managing the cleanup here on the reservation. In 2012, they were awarded a multi-million-dollar contract from the Environmental Protection Agency to remove the large piles of chat, the byproduct of mining waste that dots the landscape in Picher and the nearby towns of Cardin and Zinkville, and rehabilitate some of this land. Nearly a decade after that contract was awarded, Quapaw Nation has even more control over the cleanup. In July of 2020, a major decision by the U.S. Supreme Court came down in McGirt versus Oklahoma, which reaffirmed the Muskogee Nation's reservation. The ruling subsequently applied to 5 more tribal nations, including the Quapaw. The ruling was a win for tribal sovereignty, giving the Quapaw more control over their criminal justice system, and the decision also has implications for the tribal nation's environmental regulations.
In McGirt and now Lawhorn with Quapaws, we're really looking at different programs the tribe can take on that capacity.
Creeman is talking about the tribal nation's ability to regulate companies that do cleanup work within their boundaries. Companies like Flint Rock, Creeman points to some runoff from their site that empties in a nearby creek. It's enforcement that could fall to the tribe under the McGirt decision.
Well, we could. I think that's what's coming into question now with McGirt. You know, what can the tribe, what capacity does the tribe and our environmental office have to take on and enforce some of these environmental programs?
The creek is full of zinc and lead-tainted water because of the large underground reservoirs that seep up after heavy rainfalls. It oxidizes the trees growing near the creek and runs into the nearby Neosho River and then onto Grand Lake. Barker says McGirt is a win with the potential impact the decision has on environmental regulation and the tribal nation actively managing a Superfund site.
We have dedicated scientists, engineers, geologists that work on this day in and day out. I mean, the foremost experts here and work for the tribal nation. We're in a position of real knowledge to be able to kind of help steer this, you know, forward. And if there ever is another environmental impact of similar scope or nature, it really would be helpful.
This is their backyard, he says.
It's really best that we be able to be in a position there to hold individual actors accountable so that we're not chasing our tail, wasting time, creating environmental harm to not just the area, but to its inhabitants.
Quapaw Nation manages the cleanup in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency. And they say it's probably going to take decades to get the land here into some usable form and remove the large chat piles. And he's not sure the state of Oklahoma should or could be trusted with this effort.
Particularly whenever you look at jurisdictional authority over certain things, particularly criminal aside, I mean, even looking more in depth at environmental, come drive around Picher, come drive around Commerce, and see exactly where state stewardship has gotten us.
Ultimately, Barker says it's about good stewardship of the land, something he says Quapaws are pretty familiar with. Allison Herrera, Newsy, Picher, Oklahoma.